Okay, so this is the second part of the tutorial on how to best use some of your notes to help you on the 2020 AP Computer Science exam. So first of all, the AP exam comes with a quick reference sheet, and this is an example of the updated quick reference sheet that you will have available to you this year. You can find this online if you wanted to download it. I also have it in the folder, and this will be available to you to use on the test. And the nice thing about it is it has all of the method headers for common methods along with a description of how this method works. And according to AP Board, pretty much every problem that they give you can be solved by using either the methods that are on this quick reference or the methods that are in the problem that they give you. So you want to make sure that you're very comfortable with all of the methods that are on this page when you're trying to think of things to study. Because, for example, the array list methods, add, get, set, remove, you want to make sure that you understand that there's two different add methods. Now when it says object, what that means is that E is the class because our array list can have any kind of class. And when we create our array list and we use those angled brackets to say what type of object is in the array list, then that is the type that E takes on. So if we look at the example we ended with before the last video ended, I had an array list of type bank account. So in this case, bank account would be my E, for example. And when I say .add new bank account, in that case, I am using this .add method of the E bank account and then object. I'm passing it a new bank account object. And then it just returns true. I don't even know why it returns anything, but it does. Now, some other methods that we want to make sure that we're really comfortable with are set and remove, because set and remove both return an object. Set is going to return the object that used to be at that position. That's what it means when it says E set. It's saying it's returning of whatever type is in the array list, the object that used to be there. And E remove is going to return whatever object you have removed from the array list. And those are also super important. Okay, so if we continue on with the list that I had, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the integer or double class. And this class came up in the second free response question. I had you try the digits question. And in this question, many of you said that when you looked at the solutions, they used the integer class and they used the int value and new integer. And some of you said that you didn't know that you could use those. Some of you said that your answer worked even though you didn't use them. And I think there was some confusion as to why it worked and how you were supposed to know that you could use them. So let me first show you what is on this quick reference. So on the quick reference sheet, they do give you a little bit of information. They tell you that we have our constructor integer and all that it needs is an int value. They tell us that we have this int value method that returns the int value of this integer object. And then we have this .min value, .max value. Those constants showed up on some of our multiple choice problems that we did earlier. And those are all things related to our integer class. And then we also have the same thing for our double class. All right, so back to the question of why do we have them? Well, we didn't really use them much in class because most times when we were using array lists, we were using them of objects that we created that had more to them, more oomph, like books and students and Pokemon, and we weren't making an array list of just a boring int. However, because an array list can only hold an object, if you want to put an int in an array list, you have to put it inside of an object. And so Java has created what are called wrapper classes. Not wrapper like Jay-Z, like wrapper like WRAPPER. And these wrapper classes essentially wrap an int inside of the object. And we can access them by working with them like we would any other object. Now, if you choose to not use the new integer and the int value method, Java will take care of it for you. And this is a concept that is called auto boxing and unboxing. And so essentially think of it like this. If you want to put them in an array list, they need to be in an object. And think of the object as like a box. So if you want to put the number 5 in an array list and you just say, mynums.add5, and Java knows that it's an array list of integers, it's going to put 5 inside of a box for you and then put the box on the array list. And then let's say later you say, I want to know the value that's in spot 3. It's going to go into spot 3, it's going to open the box and then give you the value. So that is auto unboxing. And so it's essentially going to put the value into an integer object for you, boxing, or take it out of the integer object, unboxing, for you. It's automatic and there's no point loss for this. And it even said that at the bottom of the rubric, but you might not have realized what that even meant. Okay, so I just wanted to draw some attention to that because I could tell based on the comments you guys were making that that was causing you a little bit of concern. Okay, so the other big question we're going to see on our free response is class design, or writing a class. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you. First of all, any variables that you create must be private, and we've been talking about this a lot in class. If you don't make them private, you will automatically lose a point. Secondly, you must make a constructor. Remember that a constructor has no return type and it has the same name as the class, including the fact that it starts with a capital letter. The constructor is where you're going to instantiate any objects or give initial values to variables. And I put here, unless specified, you do not need to make a default constructor. That basically means you don't need to make a constructor that sets, numbers equal to 0 and strings equal to quote, quote. You only need to make the constructor it tells you to make. So for that part that I just wrote right there, if we refer back up to the example that I talked about in the first part of the video, this is what I mean right here. I've got my class header, so public class and then class name. I have a private variable. These are declared up top. Then I have my constructor. And my constructor, I can have more constructors, more than just one, but what makes a constructor unique is that it has the same name as the class. It has no return type, not even void, and it must have open and close parentheses because remember, a constructor is in fact a method. It's a special method that creates an object. Okay? All right, so let me go back to where I was. Scooch back on down. Okay, so we have to make that constructor. Next, if it asks you to make any methods in your problem, you have to write those method headers as well. The method header has to match exactly the description it's telling you. And remember that those method headers have direct access to instance variables. So let's say you write a class and the class has a variable for someone's name, someone's age, and someone's balance of how much money they have. You don't have to write getters and setters for the code inside your class. Inside your class, you have direct access to that code. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that your return types always match. So if the code tells you that the method returns nothing, make sure that you say it's a void method. If it tells you it returns an int, make sure that's in your method header and that at the end of your method, you return the int. You might even want to get in a habit of, at the bottom of your curly brace, writing the word return before you even write your code so that you don't forget about it. All right. Now, this quick reference sheet, that's what I showed with in the beginning of the video. Again, I would recommend having that handy for you when you're taking your test and also using it on every free response problem we do from here on out. Because like I said, they say that every free response problem can be done using the methods provided on that sheet. And you will notice when you look at the solutions use those methods. They don't use these crazy methods you've never heard of. They use those values. All right, so now here I just listed a hodgepodge of things that you should be able to do related to strings and arrays or array lists. These are just a set of tasks that you should be comfortable with. And if you're looking at things to do to help prepare, you could write some simple programs and try to do these things. I'm not going to go ahead and read all of them, but I just want to make sure that as you're reading through this, that if there's something that you see that you're like, ooh, I don't know about that, that would be something to comment on the discussion for today. So on today's discussion, what I want you to do is after you finish reading through this list, I want you to make a note of things that you really feel like if you were in class with me, you would say, hey, Miss Denna, can you please teach me how to work with substring again? I'm blanking. And that way I know what types of mini lessons to make to help you guys with the areas you're struggling with the most. A few things that I want to just point out within this list are this point number 5. A string, even though it's an object, it is called immutable. And what that means is that every time you make a change to the string, Java actually makes a new string and then assigns it to that same variable. So it appears like it's changing, but it's actually not. And for that reason, when strings are passed to methods, they behave like how a primitive does. And what that means is that if you pass a string into a method and you change that string inside the method, it does not preserve the change when you leave the method. It kind of behaves just like how a pass by value does. So I know that's a really tricky, finicky detail, and it, from what I've seen in the past, it only shows up on multiple choice questions, but I figured it was still worth mentioning. Also remember that you have to use dot equals when checking for equality and dot compare to when you want to see which string comes first. So make sure that you brush up on those methods. That might even be something useful to look up and just write down a little quick comparison, cheat sheet for you or whatnot. These here are just a couple quick tasks that you should be comfortable with arrays or array lists. And I made a note here that if I use the word structure, structure just refers to any structure of values, an array, a list, or an array list, rather than putting those three things all together every single time. Number 10, finding the sum or average for ints and doubles. A common mistake students have made is when they're finding an average of a list of integers, they find the sum, which is an int, they divide by the size of an array, which is an int, and as we know, int divided by int equals an int. And so the common mistake there is they forget that they need to do a typecast. So in that case, you can typecast the sum is a double, you can multiply the sum by 1.0 first, but you got to do something to make one of those numbers a double before you do the division. All right, so other things that are super important is making sure you don't go out of bounds. Whenever you have to traverse something and there's a loop of sorts, going out of bounds is always something they check for. If you're working with an array list and you're supposed to be removing values, you have to use a while loop, not a for loop, because as you remove items, the size of the elements, the size of the list changes. And so if you use a for loop, you'll end up skipping values. Alrighty. And then I just have a couple other general reminders. Again, just read through this stuff. And then what I want you to do for today's homework is on the discussion post, just write down anything that you want me to do some more teaching on, reviewing on. If you're feeling pretty good or can't think of anything in the moment, then just write I'm good or, some little something or other, just so that I can know that you've done your tasks. All right, guys, thank you and have a great day.